Jack was once a name that commanded respect throughout the business world. He owned a major company in the heart of the city, surrounded by flashing cameras, luxurious meetings, and billion-dollar contracts. But on that fateful night, everything collapsed. His phone kept ringing non-stop. Partners pulled out their investments. Shareholders turned their backs on him. The bank froze his accounts and demanded immediate repayment. In just a few hours, Jack went from a powerful CEO to a man who had almost lost everything. He sat motionless in his dark office, staring at the brightly lit skyscrapers outside the rain-covered glass window. No one was left. No employees. No friends. Only the sound of rain and a heavy silence remained. At that moment, the office door slowly opened. Tu Tien stepped inside. Without saying much, she gently placed a cup of hot tea on his desk and looked at him with warm, caring eyes. "I'm still here." Those 4 simple words tightened Jack's heart. For the first time in many years, he realized that the most precious thing in life was not hidden inside contracts or wealth, but in the person who chose to stay beside him when he had nothing left. The next morning, Jack disappeared from the city. No one knew where he had gone. No explanation. No phone call. People whispered that the famous CEO had completely broken down after bankruptcy. But in truth, Jack was returning with Tu Tien to the countryside at the foot of the mountain, the place where he had once grown up. When their car stopped at the end of the village, an abandoned wooden house stood before them. Part of the roof had collapsed. The wooden door was rotten. Wild grass covered the pathway. Tu Tien looked at the house in shock. But Jack did not. He stood there silently for a long moment. In his eyes, the ruined place was not the end. It was the beginning. The next morning, Jack immediately began working on the old house. Without hesitation, he hired a few workers from the nearby town and rolled up his sleeves to clean the place himself. The first rotten wooden boards were removed. The overgrown yard was cleared. New building materials slowly arrived. Tu Tien watched him with deep emotion. She could hardly believe that Jack, once a CEO used to luxurious offices and business suits, was now willing to get covered in dust and mud just to repair every corner of the house. Looking at the badly damaged roof, Jack said firmly, "We're going to turn this place into a real home." The abandoned house had finally found hope again. From early morning, the sound of hammers and saws echoed across the hillside. Jack and the workers removed the entire old roof because many beams had been almost completely destroyed by termites. The work was far from easy. The structure of the house had become dangerously weak. Jack did not simply stand aside and give orders. He personally carried wood, climbed onto the roof, and helped install every new beam. Sweat soaked through his shirt. His hands were covered in wood dust. Yet his face remained full of determination. Tu Tien prepared water and meals for everyone and sometimes helped clean away the broken wood pieces. Little by little, the house began to change. As the work continued, Jack discovered that the house was in worse condition than he had first imagined. Several of the main wooden pillars had deep cracks running through them, and the old floorboards creaked under every step. Some parts of the wall had been weakened by years of rain and mountain winds. Instead of feeling discouraged, Jack became even more determined. He carefully examined every corner of the house, making notes of what needed to be replaced and what could still be restored. At times, he paused and looked around silently, as if remembering pieces of his childhood hidden within those old walls. Tu Tien noticed the change in his eyes. This was no longer just a renovation project. For Jack, rebuilding the house had become a way of rebuilding himself. Every nail he hammered, every beam he lifted, seemed to carry away a part of the pain and failure he had left behind in the city. Slowly, both the house and Jack's heart were beginning to heal. On the third day, just as the new roof was nearly finished, the sky suddenly darkened. A strong wind rushed down from the mountain, causing the support frame to shake violently. A large wooden beam that had not yet been secured suddenly fell. "Watch out!" Jack quickly pulled Tu Tien aside. The beam crashed heavily onto the ground, narrowly missing her. Moments later, heavy rain poured down. Part of the newly built roof was blown away by the wind. Jack and the workers fought against the storm, trying to hold the house frame in place. The storm grew stronger with every passing minute. Rain pounded against the half-finished roof, and the wind howled through the mountain like a warning. The wooden supports groaned under the pressure, making everyone more anxious. One of the workers shouted that another beam was coming loose. Without hesitation, Jack climbed back up the slippery frame, gripping the wet wood with both hands. "Hold the ladder steady," he yelled over the sound of thunder. Lightning flashed across the dark sky, briefly illuminating his determined face. Tu Tien stood below, her heart racing as she watched him struggle against the violent wind. For a moment, it seemed as if the entire roof might collapse. But Jack refused to let the house fall apart. He tightened the ropes and secured the beam just in time. The storm raged around them, but his determination was even stronger. At that moment, Tu Tien realized Jack was not only rebuilding a house. He was fighting for a new future. While trying to fix a tilted beam, Jack slipped on the wet roof. He fell hard onto the support structure below. The workers quickly rushed to Jack's side. Rainwater mixed with mud on the ground, and his clothes were soaked through. Tu Tien rushed toward him in panic. "Jack, are you okay?" She knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she checked his injured shoulder. There was blood on his sleeve. Her eyes filled with tears. "You need to rest," she said softly. But Jack slowly pushed himself up, wincing from the pain. He looked toward the damaged roof and then back at the house. "No," he said firmly. "We can't stop now." His voice was calm, but full of determination. Even injured, Jack refused to walk away. For the first time, Tu Tien saw not the powerful CEO from the city, but a man willing to endure pain for the sake of the life they were building together. That moment brought them even closer. After the storm, several materials were damaged, and part of the roof had to be rebuilt almost from the beginning. Everyone thought Jack might give up. But the next morning, he was once again the first person to arrive. Together with Tu Tien and the workers, he started repairing the roof again, reinforcing the pillars and replacing all the weak wood. Through hardship, everyone became closer. In the following days, the renovation began to progress more smoothly. After the storm and previous accident, Jack became even more careful with every detail. The new roof was finally completed, stronger and brighter than the old one. New wooden windows were installed, opening toward the green valley below. Inside the house, Tu Tien carefully cleaned every corner, arranged the furniture, and hung new curtains that Jack had brought from town. The cold, damp atmosphere gradually disappeared. In its place came the warm scent of fresh wood and the feeling of a home being reborn. Once the roof and structure were complete, Jack began focusing on the interior details. For him, a home needed more than strong walls. It needed warmth. Early one morning, Jack and Tu Tien went to town to buy decorations. They bought soft cream-colored curtains, a small wooden table, and several flower pots for the front porch. Back home, Jack built a small shelf near the window for Tu Tien's favorite plants. He also repaired the kitchen and made a new dining table. Outside, he built a wooden swing for the front porch. When Tu Tien saw it, she froze for a moment before smiling brightly. "It's beautiful. I've always dreamed of having something like this." Her smile made every bit of Jack's hard work worth it. The house was finally complete. What had once been an old, broken house had now become a warm and beautiful home on the mountainside. On the first morning after everything was finished, sunlight poured through the new windows and spread across the polished wooden floor. Tu Tien stepped outside and took a deep breath of the fresh mountain air. Jack came out carrying 2 cups of hot tea. "What do you think of the new house?" he asked with a smile. She looked around and softly replied, "It feels like a dream." From that day on, their lives became peaceful and happy. Every morning, they cleaned the yard, watered the plants, and cared for the small vegetable garden. Every evening, they sat together on the wooden swing, watching the sunset behind the mountains. The house was no longer just rebuilt with wood and tiles. It was rebuilt with laughter, warmth, and love. One peaceful evening, Jack and Tu Tien sat together on the front porch. The warm yellow light from the new wooden windows made the place feel incredibly cozy. Jack looked at her and said softly, "I found my life again in this place." Tu Tien leaned her head on his shoulder and smiled happily. From an abandoned house, they had built a complete and loving home together. Sometimes, starting life over does not mean going somewhere new. Sometimes, it means returning to the place where your heart truly belongs. As the days passed, the little house on the mountainside slowly became more than just a place to live. It became the heart of a new life. Every morning, Jack would wake up before sunrise and step outside to breathe in the cool mountain air. The sky would slowly brighten above the distant hills, painting the clouds in shades of gold and orange. Tu Tien would soon join him, carrying 2 warm cups of tea. Together, they would sit on the wooden swing Jack had built, watching the village below come to life. For the first time in many years, Jack felt truly at peace. There were no ringing phones. No urgent meetings. No pressure from investors or endless business deals. Instead, there was birdsong, morning mist, and the gentle sound of the wind moving through the trees. Jack began helping the villagers repair fences, improve their farms, and rebuild old storage sheds. Little by little, the people in the village came to respect and admire him, not as a famous CEO, but as a man who had chosen to start over with his own hands. Tu Tien often watched him from the doorway, smiling softly. She could see the change in him. The proud businessman from the city had become someone warmer, calmer, and more genuine. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Jack turned to her and quietly said, "Losing everything in the city once felt like the end of my life." He paused, then smiled. "But now I understand, it was the beginning of something far more valuable." Tu Tien gently held his hand. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the home they had rebuilt together, both of them knew this was where they truly belonged. Not in wealth. Not in status. But in love, peace, and the courage to begin again.